She stole a billionaire's glasses to save a child from fire. That one decision in 3 seconds would expose a corrupt empire, send her uncle to prison, and transform her from invisible to unstoppable. But first, it would nearly kill her mother. 3 seconds. That's all she had. 3 seconds to choose between staying invisible or saving a stranger's life. 3 seconds before fire would swallow everything whole. But let me back up. Let me tell you how a poor girl with broken glasses became the bravest person in all of Lagos that day. And before I go any further, if you're hearing this story, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button because stories like this need to be told and you need to hear what happens next. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know if this story is reaching you in Lagos or London or Los Angeles or anywhere else in the world, because this message is for everyone everywhere. Her name was Temi, 16 years old, poor as dirt, invisible to everyone who mattered. The day started like every other day in her life. Bad. 4 in the morning. Their tiny apartment in Mushin smelled like damp walls and sickness. Her mother, Adamide, lay on a thin mattress, coughing. The sound cut through the darkness like broken glass. Every cough felt like it was tearing something inside her chest. Her little brother Dara slept curled up in the corner. 8 years old. All bones and big dreams. His stomach had been making noise all night. Hunger sounded like that. Like something dying slowly inside you. She counted the money hidden under her mattress. 2,400 naira. That's all she had from selling bracelets at the market last week. Not enough for Mama's medicine. Not enough for Dara's school fees. Not enough for anything that mattered. Her school uniform was patched in 5 places. But it was clean. She made sure of that every day. Poverty didn't mean she had to look dirty. She had her pride. It was all she had left. Her glasses sat on the windowsill, cracked down the middle, held together with tape. When she put them on, the world split into 2 blurry halves. Everything looked broken. She prepared Gary for breakfast. Mixed it with water. No sugar. No milk. Just white paste. Dara ate without complaining. He never complained. That broke her heart more than the hunger did. At 6, she left for school. The streets of Lagos were already awake and angry. Motorcycles roared past, kicking up dust. Vendors shouted, selling bread and akara. The smell made her stomach twist into knots. She walked 5 kilometers in her torn shoes. Other students arrived in big cars with drivers and cold air. Their uniforms were new, pressed smooth, perfect. They looked at her like she was dirt. Like she didn't belong. Like she was nothing. The teachers didn't look at her at all. To them, she was a ghost. She sat in the back of every class. Quiet as a dead thing. Watched everything. Listened to everything. Remembered everything. Being invisible had taught her to notice what others missed. The way people moved. The way they lied with their smiles. The way they looked right through poor people. After school, she tried selling bracelets at the market. Nobody bought any. A security guard told her to move along. She was making the place look bad. Chasing away the real customers. Real customers. Like she wasn't real. Like her money wasn't good enough. Walking home, she noticed construction crews near the plaza. Big yellow machines. Lots of workers in dirty clothes. A new shopping center coming soon. Built by some company from Victoria Island where rich people lived behind high walls. She didn't care. Rich people building rich things. Had nothing to do with her world. She got home at 5. Mima was worse. The coughing had blood in it now. Dark red spots on the cloth she held to her mouth. Dara was doing homework by candlelight, squinting at the small words. "Did you eat?" she asked. He lied and said yes. She could see his ribs through his shirt. That night, she sat by the window, looking out at Lagos. The city lights in the distance. So far away. So impossible to reach. She thought about Uncle Bayo, her father's older brother. Rich. Successful. Living in a big house in Lekki with generators and water from taps. When Mama got sick last year, they'd walked to his house to ask for help. "You people are a waste of resources," his wife had said. "Always begging instead of working hard like we did." They'd slammed the door. Left them standing outside like trash. She adjusted her broken glasses and made a promise to the darkness. One day, Dara would go to university. One day, Mima would have medicine that worked. One day, they wouldn't be invisible anymore. People would see them. really see them. She had no idea that tomorrow, everything would change. Not next week. Not someday far away. Tomorrow. And it would start with a choice she'd have exactly 3 seconds to make. A choice that would save a life and destroy everything she thought she knew about powerful people and the way the world really worked. Her books hit the dirty water with a splash, all of them floating in the gutter like garbage. And standing above her, laughing, was the boy who had everything. Let me tell you about Simeon Adelic and the kind of evil that wears expensive clothes and a smile. The next morning, she walked to school early in the same torn shoes with her broken glasses sliding down her nose. The gate was quiet, just her and the guard who never looked at her. Then she heard it. The sound of money. A black Mercedes pulled up, shiny and new, and out stepped Simeon Adelic. He was 17 years old with a designer shirt and gold chain around his neck. His friends poured out behind him, all rich and bored and looking for someone to hurt. He saw her immediately and walked straight toward her like he'd spotted something weak. His friends followed while students near the gate went quiet. He stopped right in front of her and blocked her path. Well, the beggar girl. Still thinking books will save you. His friends laughed. She said nothing, looked at the ground and tried to walk around him. He stepped sideways and blocked her again. What's wrong? Too poor to talk? Or did your mother not teach you manners before she got sick? The mention of Mama made something hot rise in her chest, but she swallowed it. If she reacted, he won. If she fought back, she'd be punished. So she stayed quiet and walked around him. That made him angrier. Run along, beggar. Go dream about food. More laughter, but she didn't look back. At lunch break, she sat under a tree and took out her notebook to study for next week's exam. If she passed, she could move up and get closer to graduating. That's when Simeon found her with 6 friends, all rich and looking for entertainment. Still studying. You know what's funny? My father owns half of Lagos. I don't need to study. I already have everything. She ignored him and kept reading. Hey, I'm talking to you. She turned the page, and that's when he kicked her books. All of them went flying right into the gutter. Her notebook, her textbooks, everything floating in dirty water mixed with oil and trash. She knelt down and reached in, pulling out pages that were falling apart with ink bleeding and words disappearing. A crowd gathered and some laughed while most just watched. A teacher stood at the edge, saw everything and did nothing. She didn't cry because she wouldn't give him that. She collected every soaked page, squeezed out the water and stacked them even though they were ruined. Simeon watched with his arms crossed, waiting for tears. She didn't break. She stood up and walked to the library, sat down and spread out the wet pages. Then she opened fresh paper and began rewriting everything from memory. Every word, every formula, every diagram was still in her head. The librarian walked by and stopped to stare. This girl was writing pages without looking at any book, just pulling it all from her mind. The woman said nothing, but she noticed. Meanwhile, across the street at the construction site, a man in simple work clothes stood watching. His name was Akin Olawale, 30 years old and looking like a regular worker. Nobody knew he owned the whole company. He'd been walking through the neighborhood all morning, watching how people treated each other and taking notes about kindness and cruelty. He passed the school just as students were leaving and saw Simeon and his friends surrounding another poor student. Then he saw her walking out with her head high, wet books in her arms and broken glasses on her face. But something in how she moved caught his attention. Pride. Strength. Like she'd been beaten but refused to stay down. He made a note in his mind. This girl had something different. He kept walking and didn't know that in 2 days, he'd watch her make the bravest decision of her life. That evening, she came home to find Dara crying. They came, he said. Uncle Bayo and Auntie. They talked to Mama. Her heart dropped. Inside, Mama sat on the mattress with tears on her face, coughing hard. What did they say? Mama couldn't speak, so Dara told her. They said we're a burden. They said you should drop out and work as a housemaid. They said I should come live with them. The room went cold. They want to take me away, Dara whispered. Mama said no, but they said they'd come back. She stood in the doorway with her hands shaking. They wanted her brother, wanted to separate them and break what little family they had left. Over her dead body. Her glasses hit the ground and shattered, and suddenly the world became a blur of screaming and smoke. The child was out there crying, fire was spreading, and she couldn't see. 3 seconds to decide. Run toward danger blind, or stay safe and let him die. Let me tell you how she got to that moment. Saturday morning came with desperation on her shoulders. She needed money, needed enough to show Uncle Bayo she could take care of her family without his help. She left early while Dara sat beside Mama's mattress. "I'll be back with food money," she promised. Her bag held 12 handmade bracelets she'd strung by candlelight all week. The plaza near the construction site was alive with Saturday energy. Vendors shouted while shoppers moved between stalls, and workers from the site sat eating lunch. She found a spot near the fountain and spread out her cloth, arranging the bracelets carefully. People walked past without stopping. A few asked the price, and when she said 200 naira, they laughed. Too expensive, they said, even though it was nothing to them. A security guard walked over and told her to move. "You're lowering the image of the plaza." She gathered her things without arguing and moved to a corner farther from the fountain where fewer people walked. Across the plaza at an outdoor cafe, a man sat alone drinking coffee. His name was Akin Olawale, though nobody here knew that. He wore simple work clothes and looked like any other construction worker on break. He'd been coming here for weeks, watching how people treated each other. He saw the guard chase her away and wrote something in his notebook. He saw how she moved without making a scene, how she kept trying even when the world kept pushing her down. Then everything changed. A loud hissing came from the construction site, and workers started shouting, "Gas leak! Gas leak!" People ran in every direction, screaming and pushing, and smoke started rising from near the generator. A small boy got separated from his mother in the chaos. He tripped and fell right where the smoke was getting thicker and sparks were flying. His mother screamed from across the plaza, but the crowd blocked her, and everyone was running away from danger. She saw him and her body moved before her mind caught up. She started running toward the boy, but then her glasses slipped and fell. She heard them crack, and when she looked down, the world had turned into a blur. For one terrible second, she froze. She could barely see anything. That's when she remembered. Earlier, she'd seen someone at the cafe drop glasses into an open bag. The bag was still there, abandoned in the panic. 3 seconds to decide. She ran to the bag, grabbed the glasses and put them on. They weren't her prescription and everything looked wrong, but she could see shapes and movement. She turned and ran toward the crying boy. The smoke was thick and she could feel heat on her skin as she got closer. She reached him just as fire ignited from the sparks, grabbed his arm and pulled him away. Fire crew came running and put out the flames. Everyone was focused on the fire, so nobody saw her hand the boy to his crying mother and slip back into the crowd. Her heart was pounding and her hands were shaking. From his cafe seat, Akin had seen everything. The glasses breaking, the pause, the decision to switch them, the run toward danger when everyone else ran away. He stood up and watched her disappear into the crowd. He pulled out his phone. "Find out everything about that girl. Everything." She returned to her selling spot on trembling legs and realized she was still wearing the stranger's glasses. Guilt hit her, but she didn't know how to return them. She counted her earnings, just 2 bracelets sold. 400 naira, not enough for medicine and not enough for anything. She walked home feeling defeated and unaware that someone had been watching. She didn't know that in those 3 seconds when her glasses broke and she made her choice, she had just changed her entire future and the future of a man who controlled billions. He stood in front of the whole school and lied through his teeth, and everyone believed him because he was rich and she was nobody. "I ran through the flames," Simeon said with his chest out like a hero. "I didn't think about the danger. I just knew I had to save that child." The principal clapped and students cheered, and she sat in the back row watching the boy who destroyed her books now steal her courage too. Let me tell you how the lie started and how it grew until everyone believed the wrong person was a hero. 2 days after the plaza incident, the story was everywhere. Local radio talked about the heroic bystander who saved a child from the gas leak, and the child's mother was interviewed. "I couldn't see who it was in the chaos," she said, "but someone saved my son." She heard it while walking to school and felt nothing. She wasn't the type to seek attention, and she had bigger problems. Mema's medicine was running out. Monday morning at assembly, the principal mentioned the rescue. "I'm proud to say one of our students may have been there. Does anyone have information?" Simeon raised his hand and walked to the front like he owned the stage. His expensive uniform, his gold chain, his friends already cheering. "Sir, I was there," he said loud enough for everyone. "I was at the plaza with my father when it happened. I saw the boy fall and I ran to save him." The lie came out smooth like he'd been practicing. He described running through flames that were barely there, talked about not thinking of danger when he only thought about himself. Students who weren't there believed him immediately because why would Simeon need to lie? Others whispered doubts, but nobody spoke up. Speaking against Simeon meant making an enemy. The principal praised him publicly and called his father. Chief Adalek's voice came through the speaker, proud and loud. "That's my boy." She sat in the back with the borrowed glasses sliding down her nose and felt anger rising like fire. Why would anyone believe me over him anyway? She thought. The truth didn't matter if it wouldn't change anything. Then her friend Kimi stood up. "But sir, I heard it was a girl who saved the child, not." Simeon cut her off. "You weren't even there. Stop spreading rumors." Kimi looked at her silently asking for backup. She shook her head slightly. "Don't fight this." Kimi sat down defeated. By lunch, the story was everywhere. His friends made it bigger and photos were posted on social media calling him a hero. Chief Adelik announced a reward for his brave son, and the story spread to neighborhood WhatsApp groups. Even her neighbors talked about it. After school, a market vendor mentioned it while looking at her. "At least some rich people care about us poor people. Not like you young ones who only think of yourselves." The irony cut so deep she could barely breathe. She walked home in silence. Meanwhile, Akin was reviewing security footage from the plaza. His assistant had told him about Simeon's claim and something didn't sit right. He watched the video frame by frame and saw the truth. Simeon wasn't near the incident, had left before the gas leak started. But the girl was there in every frame. The glasses breaking, the decision, the run toward danger. His jaw tightened. "Find that girl. I need her name, her address, everything. Today." That evening she came home and found Mama collapsed on the floor with Dara screaming and trying to wake her. Her mother's breathing was shallow and her skin burning with fever. The medicine had run out 3 days ago. She checked her bag. 1,800 naira, everything she had. The medicine cost 8,500 minimum. She looked at Dara's tears and Mama's gray skin and made a decision she hated. She had to go to Uncle Bayo and beg, had to ask for help from the man who'd slammed the door in their faces. She hated herself for it, but Mama was dying and pride couldn't save lives. Only money could. Then your mother dies. Simple choice. Your pride or her life. Uncle Bayo stood behind his locked gate and said those words like he was discussing the weather, and she realized that family meant nothing when you were poor. Let me tell you about the longest night of her life. She took an Okada to Lekki and used half her money just to get there. The motorcycle carried her from dusty Mushin to clean tree-lined roads where rich people lived. Uncle's house was 3 stories tall with new cars in the driveway, and she stood outside the gate with her heart pounding. The security guard recognized her and his face twisted. "Ah, the poor relative. What do you want now?" He made her wait 20 minutes before calling Uncle. Uncle came to the balcony and didn't invite her inside. "I told you people not to come here. We have our own problems. Uncle, please. Just 8,500 naira. Mema is dying. I'll pay you back." His wife appeared and laughed. "Pay back? With what?" "Your poverty." Uncle came down and stood behind the locked gate. "I'll give you the money. But Dara comes to live here. Permanently." She froze. "Uncle, I can't. Then your mother dies. Your pride or her life." His wife added, "And you should drop out and find work as a housemaid." Tears came. She thought about Dara and Mama, and Uncle checked his expensive watch. Her hands shook, but she straightened her back. "Thank you for the offer, Uncle, but my family stays together." He laughed and slammed the door. The guard told her to leave before they released the dogs. No money left for transport. She started walking 15 kilometers in the dark with blistering feet and borrowed glasses slipping from sweat and tears. She passed restaurants where wealthy families ate and children laughed. Near Third Mainland Bridge, she sat on a bench and prayed for the first time since Papa died. If anyone is listening, I don't need miracles. Just enough to save her. She stood and kept walking. Near Oberland, she almost collapsed into the road. A car horn blared. A black SUV stopped and a man in simple clothes stepped out. "Sister, are you okay?" She didn't recognize him, had never seen Akin clearly at the plaza. He noticed her bleeding feet. "Where are you going? Let me take you." She hesitated but couldn't walk anymore. She sat in back while he drove in silence, studying her in the mirror. At her street, he offered money. "For transport tomorrow. I don't take charity from strangers. But thank you for the ride." She stepped out while he watched. Inside, her neighbor Meman Kechi was crying with Dara. "Temi, we took your mother to General Hospital. She collapsed. They are asking for a deposit." "How much?" 25,000 naira. Her world tilted. She didn't have 25 naira. Her mother was going to die, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The monitor made one long, endless beep and the world stopped. Her mother's heart had stopped beating, and she was screaming but couldn't hear her own voice. Let me tell you how she got to that moment. She ran to General Hospital and left Dara with Meman Kechi. The emergency ward was chaos with patients on the floor and families crying. She found Mama on a corridor bed, barely conscious with an oxygen mask on her face. A young doctor approached. "Your mother has severe pneumonia. She needs ICU, antibiotics, monitoring. Please start treatment. I'll find the money." "I can't. Hospital policy. Deposit first." The administrator was stern and tired of sob stories. 25,000 naira deposit, plus daily treatment costs. Could be 200,000 total. "Please, she'll die. Many people die here. No deposit, no treatment." The waiting room was full of people listening. A wealthy woman said loudly, "These poor people always expect free things." Her companion added, "If you can't pay, don't get sick." The humiliation burned. Then she heard a familiar voice. Well, the beggar girl." Simeon walked in with his mother for a checkup. His mother was on the hospital board. He whispered something to the administrator. The administrator called her back. "Actually, your mother's condition is too critical. We recommend transferring to another facility." But the doctor said she can't be moved. "Hospital decision is final. Transfer by morning or we discharge her." Simeon watched from the corner with a satisfied look. She returned to Mama's bedside and held her hand. Her mother opened her eyes briefly. "Don't cry. Be strong." But tears came. She wiped them and adjusted the borrowed glasses. The doctor dropped a medical instruction sheet on the bed. She picked it up, trying to read through tears. The print was small. She cleaned the glasses on her shirt and put them back on, adjusting them carefully to read every word. Medication names, dosages, warnings. She memorized everything in case she had to treat Mama at home. Across the ward, Akin stood in shadow. He'd followed her to the hospital, worried. He watched her read with intense concentration, saw how carefully she adjusted the glasses, observed Simeon interfering. He pulled out his phone. "Dr. Adeyemi, I need you at General Hospital. Now. Emergency authorization. 15 minutes. She finished reading and looked at Mama's monitor. The numbers were dropping. Oxygen falling, heart rate irregular. An alarm started beeping. Nurses rushed over and pushed her aside. The doctor ran in and began emergency intervention. Dara appeared, having run from home. He grabbed her hand. Both watched their mother fight for life. The doctor worked frantically, shouting orders. Then the monitor flatlined. One long, piercing beep. Chest compressions began. She was screaming. "Mama! Mama!" Dara was crying. Everything moved in slow motion. The monitor beeped its death song, and her world ended. One long, endless beep. And silence. Her mother's heart started beating again, and the terrible beeping stopped. But 30 minutes later someone walked into that hospital and saved Mama's life without asking for money, and that's when she learned the stranger was not who she thought. After 2 minutes of chest compressions, Mama's heartbeat returned and the monitor started beeping again, weak but steady. The doctor stepped back and said she was stable for now, but without ICU and medication, the next few hours would be critical. She stood frozen while Dara cried and asked if Mama was going to die, but she couldn't answer. The nurse told her to take the boy home, but she refused and sat on the floor beside Mama's bed while Dara curled up against her. 30 minutes later, the hospital suddenly shifted as senior staff rushed around and a well-dressed doctor walked in with a medical team, going directly to Mama's bed. When the nurse said the patient hadn't been admitted yet, He cut her off and said she was now ordering immediate transfer to private ICU. She stood up confused and said she couldn't pay, but he told her payment had been arranged and her mother would receive the best care. When she asked who paid, he only said a benefactor and wouldn't explain more. The team moved Mama to ICU while she followed holding Dara's hand, entering a clean, quiet room with new equipment that was nothing like the emergency ward chaos. Nurses hooked up monitors while the doctor explained treatment, and she kept asking who paid, but nobody would answer. In the waiting room, a nurse told her they expected improvement within 24 hours, and Dara fell asleep on her lap while she stared at the borrowed glasses and wondered what was happening. The door opened and the man who'd driven her home walked in carrying bags of food and clothes, and when she recognized him, he sat across from her and said he thought she might be hungry. She asked immediately if he'd paid for her mother's treatment, and he asked if it mattered who paid, but she insisted it mattered because she didn't accept charity. He studied her and said it wasn't charity but repayment, and when she asked for what, he pulled out his phone and showed her plaza security footage. The video showed everything, her glasses breaking, the switch, the rescue, and she watched frozen as he explained that he was there and saw what she did. When she said she didn't do anything special, he told her that while everyone ran away, she ran toward danger, blind at first, then made a split-second decision to see clearly. He leaned forward and asked where she got those glasses, and guilt flooded in as she explained about the bag at the cafe and needing to see to save the child. When he said they were his, her heart stopped and she quickly removed them to hand them back, but he told her to keep them because she needed them more than he did. She asked what he wanted from her, and he said he wanted to help with her mother's treatment, her brother's education, and her own schooling. She stood up and said no because she didn't know him and couldn't accept, but he asked what if it wasn't charity, what if that quick decision and courage was worth far more than money. She told him he was lying because nothing she did was worth anything. That's when he said his name was Akin Olawale and he owned the construction company building that plaza, and her eyes went wide as she recognized the name from news reports. He explained that the gas leak was his equipment and his responsibility, that the child she saved could have died because of him, and there was more he needed to tell her about the construction site near her school. Before he could continue, his phone rang and his face went pale as he stood up fast and asked when and how bad. He looked at her and said there'd been an accident at the construction site near her school with multiple injuries, and he had to go but her mother would be fine and tomorrow he needed to speak with her about something important, something about her brother. He walked out quickly and she sat there stunned with her heart racing, wondering what a billionaire could possibly want with her 8-year-old brother and why her stomach twisted with sudden terrible fear. Dara handed her a business card with shaking hands and said a man had pulled him out from under collapsing metal seconds before it would have crushed him, and that's when she realized the billionaire had saved her brother's life before he ever knew who they were. She woke in the ICU waiting room with her neck stiff from sleeping in a chair, and when the nurse said Mama had a stable night and was awake, relief flooded through her. Inside the ICU room, Mama was conscious and weak but alive, speaking in whispers and asking what happened and how they could afford all this. She told her not to worry and just rest, but Mama noticed the borrowed glasses and asked why she was wearing different ones, so she said it was a long story. Mama gripped her hand and asked where Dara was, so she brought him in and they had a family moment with tears of relief, all three together and alive. In the waiting room, the hospital TV showed breaking news about a construction accident near Soryulair with multiple casualties at a site near a community school, and her heart stopped because that was near her school. The video showed collapsed scaffolding and ambulances while the reporter said 12 workers were injured with 3 critical and 1 dead, and witnesses reported the foreman had ignored safety complaints. When the camera showed the company name on the banner, she froze because it said a Delhi construction company. Her mind raced trying to understand because Akin said he owned the company building the plaza, but this was Adilek's site, so what was the connection? Dara tugged her sleeve with his voice small and scared, saying he needed to tell her something. He confessed that yesterday when she went to Uncle's house, he didn't stay home but followed her, taking an Okada with Maman Ketch's money. On the way back he got lost and saw the construction site where boys were playing football after workers left. He joined them and they were playing near the metal structures when one boy kicked the ball too hard and it went under the scaffolding, so he crawled under to get it and that's when the metal started shaking and the boys ran away and he got stuck. Her blood ran cold as she grabbed his shoulders and asked if he was hurt. Dara was crying now, explaining that a man in nice clothes pulled him out just before the metal fell, asking his name and where he lived before giving him a business card to give to his family. She took the card with shaking hands and read Akin Olawale, CEO of Olawale Industries, not Adelik Construction but Olawale Industries, and suddenly everything clicked. Akin wasn't working for Adelik but investigating him, and he'd saved Dara from an accident at Adelek's dangerous site. Dara added that the man asked questions about school and about her, and if anyone from school came to the site, and he'd told him boys played there after workers left, and he'd told him about Simeon and how his father owned the site and how Simeon was mean to her. Her phone rang, and when she answered, Akin said he needed her to come to his office because there was something she needed to see about the accident and about her brother. She told him she knew he saved Dara, and he said then she knew this wasn't about charity anymore but about justice, and he needed her help. She looked at Dara and the business card and thought about Simeon's lies and Uncle's cruelty and the workers who died, and she made her decision. They left the hospital and took a taxi to Victoria Island, arriving at Olawale Industries where security let them through and the elevator rose to the top floor. The doors opened to a reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos, and Akin was waiting but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him were a woman in police uniform, a man with camera equipment, and another man in a suit, with a table behind them covered in documents and photographs and video equipment. Akin looked at her and said what he was about to show her would change everything, but he needed to know if she was brave enough to tell the truth even if it meant going against the most powerful family in Lagos. She looked at the faces waiting, then down at Dara holding her hand and trusting her completely. She took a breath, stepped forward into the room and said, "Tell me everything." Chief Adelik stormed into that press conference and pointed at her and called her a liar and a thief in front of every camera in Lagos, and the room exploded into chaos while she stood frozen at the microphone. Let me tell you how she got to that moment. Akin gestured to the table covered in files and photos, explaining that for 6 months he'd been investigating Adelik Construction for safety violations and corruption. He showed photos of workers without safety equipment and children on construction sites and falsified inspection documents, saying yesterday's accident was the 7th in 2 years and all the others had been covered up. His voice got tight as he explained that 3 years ago his younger brother worked at Adelek's site during university break and died when scaffolding collapsed, and Adelik paid off everyone to call it worker negligence. His parents took the money, but he refused and swore he'd bring Adelik down legally. The inspector said they'd been building a case, but Adelik had connections everywhere, and the journalist said witnesses disappeared and stories got killed. The lawyer said they needed someone Adelik couldn't touch, and all eyes turned to her. Akin pulled up plaza footage showing the gas leak was caused by substandard equipment Adelik installed, then played video in slow motion from an angle she'd never seen. The footage showed Simeon near the generator 2 minutes before the leak, tampering with something. When Akin said Simeon deliberately caused that leak, she couldn't believe it, but the journalist explained Simeon had failed his exams and needed to look heroic to his father. He'd planned to rescue someone from a minor incident, but it went wrong and got bigger than expected. Akin explained they couldn't prove Simeon's involvement without witnesses, and they needed her to testify about who really saved the child because her testimony would break his credibility, and once proven a liar about one thing, everything else would unravel. She said if she testified they would destroy her, but Akin said she wouldn't be alone, and the inspector offered protection while the journalist said public pressure couldn't be bought. Dara spoke up and asked Akin if he saved him from the construction site, and when Akin nodded, Dara said maybe they were supposed to save people back because that's what brave people do. She thought about Mama almost dying and the workers who died and Akin's brother and all the poor people Adelik had crushed, and she adjusted the borrowed glasses. She asked if her mother's treatment would continue and Akin said guaranteed, and she asked about her brother's education and he said full scholarship. When she asked what would happen to her, he said she'd become the girl who stood up to power and told the truth. The inspector said they needed an answer now because the press conference was in 2 hours, and she looked at the evidence in Dara's trusting face and cleaned her glasses and said she'd tell the truth. The next 2 hours were frantic as she practiced her statement while the journalist coached her, and the inspector's phone kept ringing because Adelek's people were mobilizing, trying to stop the conference, so they decided to go live immediately. They rushed to the press conference room where cameras waited and journalists filled the space, and when she saw the crowd, Panic rose until Akin whispered that she'd had 3 seconds to save a life and she did it then and could do it now. The doors opened to blinding lights and she stepped toward the microphone, but then commotion erupted at the back as Chief Adelik stormed in with security and lawyers, roaring that the conference was illegal. Behind him came Simeon looking terrified and Uncle Bayo with his wife, and when Uncle saw her, his face twisted with rage as Adelik pointed and shouted she was a liar and a thief. The room exploded with cameras flashing and voices shouting and security moving, and she stood frozen watching her nightmare walk through the door. This was war. She stepped to the microphone while chaos erupted around her and said her name was Temi Adebowl and she was 16 and poor and nobody, but she was at the plaza and she saved a child's life, and when Simeon shouted that she was lying, she spoke louder and said he wasn't there and he claimed credit for something he didn't do. Let me tell you how justice finally came. The room exploded with everyone shouting and Chief Adelik yelling that this was a setup, but Akin's voice cut through calm and cold, saying his lawyers couldn't stop the truth, and when Adelik saw him, his face darkened as he mentioned Akin's brother's accident. The journalist projected plaza footage on the screen showing Simeon tampering with the generator, and gasps came from the press while Simeon went pale. Adelik shouted the video was fake, but the lawyer said 3 independent analysts would testify it was authentic, and then they showed Simeon's school assembly lie. Uncle Bayo tried to reach her, but the inspector said they knew he was the site supervisor who signed off on falsified safety inspections and approved the scaffolding that collapsed, and workers died because of his negligence. Uncle's wife screamed he was following orders, and the inspector said then he was complicit. She stepped to the microphone and her voice shook but carried as she told the room she was at the plaza and saved a child's life, and when Simeon shouted she was lying, she said louder that he wasn't there and claimed credit for something he didn't do. Adelek's lawyer asked why anyone should believe her when she wore stolen glasses, pointing at them and calling her a thief. Akin stepped beside her and told cameras those were his glasses and he gave them to her because she borrowed them to save a child's life, showing footage of her trying to return them. He said she wasn't a thief but the most honest person in the room. The back door opened and the mother and child from the plaza entered, and the mother said she didn't know any Simeon, but she remembered her and would testify anywhere that she saved her son. The boy ran to her and hugged her leg while cameras captured everything. An injured worker from yesterday's accident arrived in a wheelchair and said he told the site supervisor the scaffolding was unsafe but was told to shut up or lose his job, and he broke down crying about his friend who died leaving 3 children behind. The journalist revealed testimony from 17 workers across 5 sites reporting the same violations, projecting documents showing falsified inspections and bribes and bank transfers, and the room erupted because this was bigger than expected. Simeon panicked and cried to his father saying he was sorry and just wanted him to be proud, accidentally confirming he caused the plaza leak, and Adelik tried to silence him but cameras caught everything. The inspector signaled and police entered to arrest Chief Adelik and Simeon and Bayo for criminal negligence and bribery and corruption, and when Adelik raged that he knew the commissioner and governor, the inspector said the conference was broadcast live and his connections couldn't save him now. Within minutes it was trending across social media, too big to suppress. Days later at the hospital, Mima was recovering and news played about Adelik being charged and his company assets frozen, and Uncle was arrested while his wife begged forgiveness but she walked away. Akin visited with news that Mima's treatment was complete and Dara had full scholarship through university. He handed her an envelope with acceptance to prestigious private school and said when she graduated, there was a job as safety inspector if she wanted it. She looked at Dara sleeping and Mima resting and removed the borrowed glasses, and Akin said to keep them because they saw more clearly on her. She smiled and said she'd take the scholarship but earn the job with no charity. Weeks later on her first day at new school, she wore a new uniform but kept the borrowed glasses, and Dara walked with her to his better school. At the gate she waved at Mama who stood healthy and smiling, and she adjusted her glasses and saw the future clearly. 3 seconds was all it took to choose courage over safety, and it changed everything. She didn't just save a child but saved her family and gave voice to the voiceless and brought down an empire of corruption, all because she chose to be brave. You're never too small or too poor or too invisible to change the world. You just need 3 seconds of courage. Now let me ask you something important. What would you have done in Temi's position? Would you have stayed invisible and safe, or would you have run toward the fire? Think about that for a moment, because we all face those 3-second decisions in life, those moments where we choose between what's easy and what's right. Drop your answer in the comments right now. I'm reading every single one, and I want to know what this story taught you about courage and justice and standing up to power. And listen, if this story moved you, if it made you feel something deep in your chest, then you need to do 3 things for me right now. First, smash that like button, because it tells me you want more stories like this, stories that matter, stories that remind us we're never powerless. Second, hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications, because next week I'm bringing you another story that will shake you to your core, another tale of the invisible becoming visible, and you don't want to miss it. And third, share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who feels small or powerless or invisible, because they need to know that 3 seconds of courage can change everything. Thank you for being here with me on this journey. Thank you for caring about Temi and Dara and Mama and everyone who stood up for what was right. Now go out there and find your 3 seconds of courage. Stay blessed, stay brave, and I'll see you in the next story.